stuff. All right, welcome everyone to another in our episode at here at the Case SIG in ARA, talking to professors, talking to researchers, talking to community about research and how we do what we do so we can share those thoughts and information and ideas with you. Today we have Mercy Agyepong, who's going to speak to us. Thank you so much. Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. You know, it's 9:30, 5 a.m. here, so quite early, but you know, the day's going well. The semester's coming to an end here, which I'm looking forward to for sure.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Mercy is an assistant professor in sociology of education in the Department of Applied Statistics, Social Sciences and Humanities. Born in Accra, Ghana, and raised in the Bronx, New York, her work focuses on urban education, race and ethnicity, Africana, African diaspora studies, immigrant youth education, post-colonial theory, post-colonial sociology, anti-Blackness, and ethnography. Specifically, she conducts research on the racialization of American immigrant students in urban public schools and the impact of Africanness and Blackness on their educational experiences and academic achievement. And of course, you can find so much more about her on our website and on the university's website. And thank you so much for the work you do. This work is needed. This research is needed. So quick question, let us start with this. Tell me about your research.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about what I'm currently working on now. So I'm currently, I received a small grant from the American Educational Research Association, AERA, to put forward a research on the impact of COVID-19 on the school experiences and home experiences of African immigrant students in New York City. So that's what I'm currently working on now. It is, I began this semester, which is fall 2021. And it's gonna go on till the end of the school year, which is for us in New York, it's at the end of June. So it's a 1-year project that I'm working on. And what actually drove me to this project was, well, you know, we are living and existing and surviving in a current pandemic. And a lot of the data that was coming out, the initial data that was coming out, the statistical data specifically that was coming out, indicated the high impact of the pandemic on those who identified as Black and those who had immigrant status, right? So I was really interested in, well, then how is the COVID-19 pandemic impacting those who occupy both identities, right? Those who are Black and who are immigrants. And so I was, and given that my research in general is really focused on K-12 schools and particularly high school, I was really interested in how, you know, Black immigrants in high school, specifically African immigrants, are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and how that is shaping their school experiences, their home experiences, their relationship with their parents, their siblings, teachers, so on and so forth, and ultimately how that is impacting their academic achievement.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so that's the current project, yes.
Awesome. And, you know, just listening to it, I know as researchers and students listening to you is thinking, well, how do you get that information? How do you get that? You know, we're so used to, oh, here's a survey, go answer this question, send it back, that kind of stuff. But there's so much going on with how we're pivoting and doing research. So tell me more about the method. Tell us about the methods you're using.
Sure, I would love to. So I am doing, because I usually do ethnographic research, which requires me to be in schools doing participant observation, taking field notes and so on and so forth. But because of the pandemic, I had to pivot into doing research online or virtually. Yes. So the methods that I'm using for this particular study are interviews, which are done via Zoom or via phone calls, whatever is more convenient for the participant. And in addition to doing it, collecting data via interviews, I'm also doing a data collection style in which I provide students or participants with a journal. We have a virtual journal, a digital journal, where they they write in it about 30 minutes every week. And I have prompt questions for them, but they don't have to follow it, right? They could just, essentially the purpose of that is for them to just tell me how their week was, as it relates to school, how their week was as it relates to being home, and so on and so
Mhm.
forth, right? So because I wasn't able to do data collection within schools, I still wanted to be able to get kind of like the day-to-day experiences of these students without being able to be in the school space or in their homes to like observe them. So doing the digital journal actually
Yes.
allows me to still collect somewhat of a daily/weekly data that I'm not able to do so.
Yeah, no, I think that in listening to you and hearing, I mean, I've known many persons who are conducting interviews online. So that's what's happening. And they're using phone and they're using the iPhone and they're using voice messages. I did an entire interview on a podcast, an entire podcast interview by using voice notes. I was totally impressed and amazed by the technology. But I really want to go back to this idea you just shared about the digital journal. No, that's powerful. That I'm just listening and thinking about in order to capture the real-time energy. So tell us share a little bit more about that. How does that work with the students and the interaction with you?
Yeah, so I actually thought of this again, this journal, because I do love being in the school spaces
Yes.
and being able to engage with my participants, see them, to understand how they are navigating the day-to-day lives.
Mhm.
And because I couldn't, I decided to pivot to this particular journal. I was watching a video on YouTube, and it was a video of a teacher whose name I can't remember right now, as a K-12 teacher, who was talking about using journals as a way to communicate with their student during when we were in quarantine. And I thought, wow, well, this is a great idea as a form to collect data, right, when you can't
Yes,
be in
yes,
person.
yes.
And so how the journal works is that I share via Google Drive, I share a journal with students. So not one journal with each students, right? And every student have an individual journal.
Yes.
And every week they have to go in, or they're asked to go in about 30 minutes to write about the experiences. And what usually happens is that about every week or two, I will go in to read what they're saying. And if I have questions, I will leave questions in the comments section. So I'll
Right.
leave a comment with my question about their experiences, right? And again, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm not able to be there to like, ask them questions when they say it to me, right? When they say things to me, ask direct questions. So allowing myself to be able to go in and leave comments to ask more questions, follow-up questions, actually has been also a really helpful way to get data from the students. Again, just because I'm not able to be there in person. So, they have these journals, they write in them. I go in, I read through it. If I have questions or comments, I will leave them using the comment tab. And so it's a way for us to kind of continue to engage with each other, as opposed to just giving them a journal and saying, hey, okay, write in it and we will reconvene at the end of the school year, right? I want them to know that I am still engaging with them and that I'm still, the research is ongoing.
Yeah.
Also doing research for high schoolers, right? It's always very tricky because, they have real, lives, and they have real issues that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And so it's easy for them to then forget to engage with the study. So
Yes.
me using the journals will allow me to then continue to communicate with them, right? Yeah.
Wonderful. No, wonderful. And I can just imagine the rich data that comes from that conversation, thinking about ethnography and thinking about qualitative research, just the richness of their voice, because we need more of their voice in our work. So thank you so much for that. So we are listening, and I know everybody's listening, and watching, and they're listening, they're thinking, wow, that's beautiful. And then sometimes you get a researcher will say, well, how do I even start? It sounds like so hard. And you get that energy from the students. I want to ask you, describe the process of getting your research underway before this all beautiful journal and all the amazing stuff starts. What happens in the beginning? What happens in the start for you?
Yeah, so I think the start comes with the idea, right? You have to have a question that you want an answer to, right? You have to have some kind of research question, or something that you're thinking about and wanting to find if there's already an answer to it. And if there is, then you don't need to go and do the search for it, right? You can just read about it and find out what the answer is. But the first thing that brings you to a research is your research question. What are you interested in interrogating, and why? What are you interested in interrogating? Why are you interested in that? And why do other people need to know this, right? So I think you have to kind of, as a student, you have to sit down, think through this, and write them out, right? So you write it out, and then there's a lot of technical process things involved in doing research, right? You have to write out what it is you want to study, write out how you want to study it, right? So for example, if I say I'm interested in the impact of how factors related to COVID-19 shape the school and home experiences of African immigrant students. Well, okay, that's great. How am I going to study it, right? Are you going to do it through interviews? Are you going to do it through, field notes? Are you like, what method? The method is the tool that you use to collect data, right? What method are you actually going to use to collect the data? You also have to think about what methodology you're going to use. And oftentimes people confuse methods with methodology, right? So methodology, for example, will be like, methodological approach would be the type of research you're going to do. So is it going to be an ethnography? Is it going to be a case study? Is it going to be a phenomenological research, right? So these methodologies will then tell you what methods you have to use. So if you want to do ethnography, for example, that means that you have to do field work, right? That means you have to do participant observation, including interviews. But if you want to do other types of research, you will not need to essentially do field notes, right? So starting with your question, figuring out your methodology, then picking out the methods, and then starting from there, right? And then of course you have to go through it and apply for IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. Every institution have that. And you have to fill out an application to get an approval of from them to allow you to do research that involves human subjects. So research that involves people, you have to do that too. So these are the technical part. And I don't know if you want me to say.
No, right? But I love, I'm literally listening to you and I'm loving how you're breaking down the technical parts, because for the last 3 years also, I teach in a Master of Teaching program at University of Toronto, and our MTs, we call them MT, MT students, they all do a research, qualitative research, interview, our document analysis, and just listening to you clarifying and making notes, like definitely, like I'm going to share this with them as well. So I'm definitely going to bring you into my research area, because listening to you break that down is so important. And a lot of our students are really, they struggle. And I think sometimes I say to them, research it has its challenges. So I want to ask you, not just as a researcher now, but I want you also to put on that professor hat as well, because you wear a dual hat there. Tell us, what are two major challenges, especially when it comes to method and research and collecting data? What are two major challenges, you have gone through, and how maybe you worked at those?
Yeah, so actually, I will put on the researcher hat for this question, right?
Please.
Since it's a research-based question. One of the major challenges that, again, I do ethnographic work, so I go into spaces to study what's going on with these spaces, how people are navigating it. I would say one of the major challenges that I faced in my research experience was doing research with immigrant students, right? So I'm particularly interested in the experiences of immigrant students in the US. And in my previous research, which I did for my dissertation, which was so a little bit of context, my dissertation data was collected in 2016 and 2017. And during that particular sociopolitical time in the US, immigration policies and politics and discourse was very, tricky, for lack of better words. And so when I went into schools to say that I'm interested in talking to immigrant students, a lot of teachers were a little suspicious of me, right? They wanted to know why I wanted to talk to their immigrant kids, right? They wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to do anything that will harm the students, right? So I think when you go in as a researcher, there's a lot of, I would say when I went in to do this particular research, that is not one thing that I thought I will be a challenge, right? Because I myself am an immigrant kid. And so I didn't think that people could see me as a person that will be there to harm their students, right? And these are things that you have to think about. So these are, and because teachers were suspicious of me at first, they were reluctant to actually engage in my research, because my research at that particular research involves teachers as well. And it took some time for me to gain their trust, to let them know that, I'm not here about people's statuses. I am genuinely here just to understand these students' experiences in school and how that shaped their academic achievement, right? So always being aware of course, going into research, there's a lot that there's struggles that you will face that you might not think of before you go in, which is fine. But for me, this is one of the things, really making sure that I am aware of taking in the sociopolitical climate of the time, taking in how that would then position me as a researcher within a school who wants to do research that have to do with immigrant kids, right? So really being aware of your population that you're engaging with, and your relationship or the relationship within which your identity and their identity might clash or might be perceived as clashing, right? These teachers thought that, if I collected certain data and shared it, it might jeopardize the students' legal status, so on and so forth. So they were suspicious about that, which they should be, right? They should be. But this is one thing that I didn't think about. Another struggle that I've experienced is honestly, research is, if you do ethnographic research, is a long-term research, right? You're not just doing interviews, taking the data and moving on. You're doing a 1-year research, right? And I think oftentimes when students, particularly when you go into these studies, you're not aware of how exhausting it is. Research is exhausting, right? You're not aware of how exhausting it is when you're a master's student, a PhD student going in to do research. And if you're going to do a long-term research, it's very exhausting. I'm constantly going into schools every day, talking to people every day, right? And while it is my job, and I love doing it, I think sometimes I forget that it's still a job. Just because I love doing something doesn't mean it's not a job. And so I think for me, it got to a point where I was like, okay, I need a break. Like I need to take like a couple of days off and just, just rest, rejuvenate. And it's okay to do that. I think it's okay to do that. But when you're a master's or PhD student who's trying to do a dissertation, you're feeling like every minute count, and every minute does, but you rest and also count, right? You need to be your best self to be able to go and collect data, especially if you're doing long-term data that involves you engaging with people every day, day in and day.
Wonderful. No, wonderful. Some words I heard, the socio-political, environment, and how does that think about, I think sometimes we forget research has to be the broader scope there. And I love when you talk about positionality and identity. I literally smiled on the inside when you talk about that, because so many times our students don't get it, that your positionality and your identity impacts the kind of information that is going to be shared with you. That will gonna be shared with you. And sometimes as novice researcher, they walk in and thinking, well, if I ask you 10 questions, you're gonna answer me. No, somebody will answer, an immigrant will answer 10 questions to one researcher and answer the same 10 questions in a different way to somebody else based on positionality and identity and the socio-political context. And I love that you underline the word trust. I love it. We're trying to get to our researchers to understand what trust looks like in research. And so we're going to wrap up this conversation. That amazing, you already gave me that amazing advice to the novice about the self-care. But I want to ask you, as your final question, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to novice researchers or persons considering embarking or doing research in terms of making the process? Any advice for novice researchers, what would you give?
Ooh, okay. Advice is ask questions. I am a firm believer in asking questions because, as you said, you're a novice researcher, right? And honestly, you can read all the methods and methodology books and analysis books and coding books. Like you can read all those books, but until you've actually gone in and done research, there's so many things that happens that the books don't tell you, right? Because everybody have very different experiences when they're doing research. So I always say ask questions, right? Just ask questions to your peers, ask questions to your mentors if you have some, hopefully you do, ask questions to your advisors, and ask for feedback, right? Questions is not just like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, what do you think? But also write things down and ask somebody to take a look at it for you, because I think there's a lot of things that as a student researcher, again, one, you're not aware of, and one, you're not thinking of. There's some things that you're not thinking of that other people who've already done research have already experienced, right? And so they'll be able to bring your attention to potential things that are missing in your research or your research ideas, or potential things that they might think that, hey, actually that sounds good on paper, but that's not gonna work when you get into the field to do data collection, right? And these are things that, you just don't know because you're starting up. So I always say ask questions, ask for feedback, and don't ever be nervous to do that. It's important. It's really important. I think when you're in grad school, you feel like, oh, I have to do everything on my own. I have to do everything myself, and most of the time you have to, but that's why you have committees and you have professors. Ask them for feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what, Mercy? I'm going to definitely ask the SIG, our Caribbean African Studies in Education, a part of the AERA, American Education for Research, for a part 2 of this. I need a part 2.
Great.
I need a part 2. I just lived my entire Black joy right now with you. I need a part 2 because there's so much coming from you that I think I genuinely, and I'm going to request a part 2, genuinely think more of our students need to hear. More of our students also who identify like you and I as Black immigrant need to understand, because when you talk about that context, that positionality, that understanding the socio-political climate in doing research, there are so many missing parts that I think many of our students have not gotten. And I want to meet you again. So we're going to talk, we're going to plan. Thank you so much. Final word, 1 minute, final word goes to you. Go ahead. Anything to the students, to the people listening, final word.
Listen, thank you so much for taking however long this has been to listen. I hope that you found it fruitful. I hope that you found it useful in whatever stage you're in. And definitely reach out to me if you just want to, talk to a Black woman professor who was trying to figure this thing out herself as well. So reach out if you need to, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mercy, thank you so much. Agyepong, thank you so much. Thank you.